Yeah, I mean, the issue is that usually not why we don't.
So I think we're going to go ahead and get
Really
started
hard
in the interest of maximizing everyone's time here. So my name is Jessica Hartle. I'm the lead information officer for the Office of Food for Peace. I recognize a few of you, but hope to get to know more of you over the course of this hour and a half. I brought with me one of my colleagues. We now have an information team at Food for Peace of four people, which you may not know. So we are looking to do a lot more communication around the work that you all do for our program. So this is a great opportunity for us to figure out the best ways for us to communicate the great work that all of your organizations do. We have 2 more who are on the way for our event, but may have gotten held up in the metro problems this morning. Glad you all could make it. So the goal for this, I think, is really to share with you what Food for Peace and more generally USAID are really looking for in success stories. So kind of the key elements that we see that should go into success stories. Also, how we're actually using those stories. You may think they go into the USAID void, never to be heard from again, but we do use them very frequently. So I want to share with you a little bit about how we actually are using success stories. And then walking you through the template that we put together is kind of a guide, in addition to a beneficiary questionnaire that we've developed as kind of a starting point for when doing interviews specifically for success stories. So the first kind of half of this, we're going to kind of all talk with you about kind of USAID and Food for Peace's vision around these success stories. And then the second half, we're going to break up and do a little bit of peer-to-peer work, and also our team will float around and assist as needed. So hopefully you saw an email yesterday to bring a success story with you. If you didn't, we brought success stories as well, so that we could share with you some examples of success stories and where we might see areas for improvement. So we do also have 2 colleagues from the Bureau for Food Security at USAID who just walked into the room, so Meredith McCormack and Jessica Dunkel. They are also communications folks with the Bureau for Food Security. I figure since a fair number of your organizations also work with the Bureau for Food Security and Feed the Future on food security programming, that it might be useful to have them in the room as well. So feel free when we break up into smaller groups to speak with them as well. So with that, I'll get started. So why do we want success stories? It's the obvious question, telling about what we do and all the great work that we do. You know, it's used as a justification for Congress to fund us, for one thing, but also to really show the impact that we're having. I think there's great stories to tell throughout all the programs that our partners do, and we're just not finding out about that. So how does Food for Peace specifically actually use these stories? They're used in a variety of different ways. So you all know the Transforming Lives page on the USAID website. That is one vehicle for a lot of the success stories. But we do use stories in different ways. So, for example, we'll put specific snippets of success stories that you all write in speeches for the administrator or for our assistant administrator, for testimony they might be giving on the Hill to Congress about a specific country situation. They may be using snippets from success stories for that. Reports to Congress. Most of you working on Food for Peace programs know we submit our annual report to Congress called the International Food Assistance Report, and we do success stories in there on a specific set of countries that we focus on each year. So we use success stories in that report to Congress. More generally with Congress, it's a great tool for our staff to take up to the Hill and use as an example when they're trying to do the work that we do when talking to members of Congress and their staff. General presentations around the agency, particularly Food for Peace, has come into focus in the last 8 months within the agency itself because of food aid reform. And so it's a lot of explanation on our part as to what does actually a Food for Peace program look like on the ground. So success stories are a great tool for us to be able to do that and give colleagues in USAID a better sense of what we do on a day-to-day basis, both on the emergency and the development side. So those are kind of the key ways we share these success stories. So they are used. We really value the work that you all do and have submitted to us and taken the time to submit to us on a regular basis. We also have used, and this is something that's more recent, since partners have been required to submit quarterly reports to us, we'll notice maybe a paragraph in there describing something that's cool and innovative happening with a particular program. We'll use that as kind of a jumping off point to say, okay, well, maybe we can delve into this story a little bit bigger. How can we use this and expand upon it for us to use as a larger communications tool?
So can you just speak up a little bit?
Speak up a little bit? Okay.
No, I think just it should stand within the tape here.
Well, the microphones are here, and there, so.
Yeah.
See if that's better. Sorry.
Sorry.
There's a webinar participants as well, so we want to make sure they hear. We also are starting to use success stories more and more to push out through Frontlines, USAID's magazine that comes out e-magazine that comes out every other month. In Future, our partners have a newsletter as well, so we are looking to contribute content for that, particularly in countries where Food for Peace and Feed the Future are both working. So there's a variety of mechanisms that we use to push out success stories. So don't think that just because you haven't seen it come out in some various form or other across USAID communications pieces that we're not using it. And for our part, we're going to do a better job of sharing with partners when we actually do use those stories so that you know those stories are being used and are something that we really value. So what do we see as kind of key elements that we want to see in success stories? There's a couple of things. One, the human element. We get this feedback all the time from our public affairs office, putting a human face to the program and not just kind of listing facts out, but actually having a specific example, whether it's of a beneficiary or, for example, if there's a water management committee, maybe a quote from the individual that's managing the water management committee. Things like that, so that there is kind of a human element in the story and not just a kind of straight reporting of the facts. Key results. You've probably seen across the agency there's a lot more focus on outcomes and results as opposed to just outputs, the number of people trained, but what does that training actually do? That's reflected now in our success stories, and we're really wanting to see more of that type of information in our success stories. So someone may have been trained on nutrition messaging. Well, what is that? So what? How are we showing the actual impact of that nutrition training? That a teenager, woman is starting to breastfeed her child exclusively before the age of 6 months. Things like that. Those are the kind of key nuggets that we really are looking for in the success stories. The one other thing that I would say, and this is less applicable, I would say, to development programs, since we don't do as much food aid distribution with development programs, more so on the emergency side, but we don't want to just talk about food. You guys do a whole host of other things that are integral into that overall food security. Those are the kind of pieces that we want to pull into the success stories, so that it's not just us talking about food that we hand out, but what is the larger picture that we're talking about. Innovations. I had mentioned briefly, seeing something in a quarterly monitoring report from our quarterly report from our partners, picking up on a few sentences in there on something new and cool that we were doing. That's something that's great for you to highlight in a success story. I talked about putting the human element in there. If you have results related to that specific person, so for example, they've increased their income on their farm as a result of some of the interventions that you all have been working with them on, kind of put that in the larger context of what's happening with the overall program. So you have the individual element, but that's placed within a larger context, so that the general reader will have a better sense of where that is coming from and what that means within the larger context of your program. And then kind of the final kind of key element that I see, focus in on one specific area. I'll read success stories that pretty much have everything in the kitchen sink in them, and for us, that's great that you want to include all those elements, but to really tell the effective story, at least from our viewpoint, focusing in on one or two aspects of that is really key, and I think is much more compelling story than trying to tell everything that's happening. If you want to talk about everything, maybe we'll work with you all to create a suite of stories about your specific program. But I think, if you're focusing in on the one specific element, that's something that we see as really valuable because you're telling that story kind of from one perspective. So USAID, you probably all have visited our branding website and seen the templates for success stories on the USAID website. There are 5 different templates that USAID currently puts on the website. I'm not sure how much guidance you all have gotten about those specific templates. And I'm not sure, honestly, how much the agency really adheres to those anymore. So just kind of keep that at the back of your mind. And we have a couple of examples that we brought along. They have 5 different templates, which unfortunately they don't provide any instructions on our website on what exactly that means. So there's a snapshot success story, a first-person success story, before and after, case study, and then a photo and caption. So 4 of those are pretty self-explanatory. First person, before and after is, person before, interventions from USAID and partners, and then what has happened as a result of those interventions. Case study being more kind of an academic perspective on results. Photo and caption, this is a lot what's used actually on the impact blog, doing a photo of the week with a caption from a partner or from a USAID staff person. Snapshot is the one where I'm less clear on what exactly they want in terms of how that differs from the other stories. I don't know if you ladies have any thoughts on that particular format, or if you all use that at all.
We will sometimes use sort of the success story to convert that into a feature, newsletter or article format, but we don't really have the same template.
So for those on the phone, I just asked our colleagues from Bureau of Food Security about that, and I honestly don't know how much the templates are used anymore within the agency. The guidance that we give within the agency, specifically for writing success stories, is much more along the lines of a before and after story and a case study in terms of all the key elements that we want to put in there. So the template that I gave all of you all, which you should have a copy of in front of you, is something that we've basically adapted off the internal guidelines that USAID's Public Affairs Office has given to us as communications officers. So I figured that would be the most useful to share with you all instead of 5 different templates, but one that we use frequently and that has been the guidance from our public affairs. So I did just want to reference those USAID templates because I know they are still floating out there and partners still use them when they're submitting success stories to us. So not to say that you shouldn't submit those, those are great, but kind of keep in mind some of the elements from today's session and maybe figure out ways to incorporate those into what you submit on a day-to-day basis. So you have in front of you two items. So the first is a success story template that we developed internally in Food for Peace, as I mentioned, based off of what our public affairs team has developed as guidance for USAID communications staff. And then the second piece is a beneficiary questionnaire, and this is something we've developed recently for when we are going out on travel to visit programs as communicators, but also starting to share this with Food for Peace staff that are going out on travel so that they kind of keep the questions in mind that we see as key when they're going out to do their site monitoring. So this is something that we'll definitely share with you all electronically. A guide, it's not the end-all, be-all. I'm sure you've done this a million times interviewing a beneficiary, and one question leads to another that's not on your list of questions, but is something that you think is particularly valuable to ask them. So just kind of keep this as a guide more so than anything. And we'd love feedback on it because particularly Beneficiary Questionnaire is something new for us to be using as a tool. So if you think there are key elements that we've missed in there, or other ways that you see we should frame interviewing about beneficiaries, I'm sure you have a wealth of experience yourselves in terms of going out and writing success stories. Please feel free to give us feedback, and we'll share with everyone our communications contact information, so you can reach out to us after this session with any follow-up questions. I did want to introduce the two other members of my team, so Kate Oberholzer and Dylan Butler. And between the four of us, we are splitting ourselves up geographically within Food for Peace. So I'll send out through TOPS our contact information and list for you all which regions we each cover, so that you can reach out to a specific person if you have a specific question related to a success story you're writing on Burkina Faso, for example. That would be Nina. So, so that you have a specific contact within Food for Peace, and then, of course, always feel free to reach out to me as the lead communications person. So are any questions so far? All right, I've just run a lot of information past you, so please feel free to ask questions. Okay. So what I wanted to do is walk you through the success story template that we gave you all. So if you want to just pick that up, and then we'll, from that, feel free to ask some questions as well. So up front is just really kind of what the different kind of broader issues that we're looking to include in, so I won't really go into that. What I was hoping to do is just walk you a little bit through kind of the format that we've seen as a really kind of good way to frame success stories. Did everyone get a copy, by the way? Nina has those, if you did not. Okay. So the first thing, and a lot of this is developed based on questions we've gotten back from our public affairs team. So it's really something that we've developed as a result of them constantly asking us questions when they're looking to post it on the Transforming Lives website. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? So that's what we try to incorporate into kind of a simple template to help guide you all. And I'm sure you all, I know we get great success stories from you all. So it's not that we don't like the success stories you share with us at all. Please don't feel that this is us saying you've been doing a bad job and we want you to improve it. We're looking just for you to simply kind of expand upon the good work that you're already doing, and so that you have a better sense of what our specific needs are on our end. So the first section that we ask you to focus on is really kind of setting the context for what's happening in the specific country, whether that's related to a specific disaster that may have just happened. I think this example is related to the presidential election in Côte d'Ivoire. So kind of setting the scene almost for what's happening in the larger country, so that we have a sense of, you know, why this program might be coming in and responding to whatever is specifically happening. And of course, that's related to kind of chronic problems as well. So not just any one specific incident, but there may be, you know, long-term high rates of stunting and malnutrition in Guatemala, and that may be why you have a development program in Guatemala to respond to that. So, so just kind of setting the context for why this country, you know, might need assistance from USAID. And then kind of moving from that into talking about how the program is responding to that, and specifically spelling out, you know, if we're giving out a food assistance, if it's an emergency, talking about that and how that's actually being implemented. If it's a development program, talking about some of the interventions that you may be undertaking to address the broader issue of food security in that country. So this is your opportunity to really kind of delve into those details and focus on the beneficiary, for example, that you may want to profile in your success story. And also some of the key successes you see coming out of what the programs have been doing. So The third element is really focusing on why this specific program is the appropriate response. It may not be obvious to the general public why we would do a food security program to respond to a specific issue. So this is an opportunity to kind of, I feel like, educate the basic reader on what exactly, why this is appropriate, and why this program is really needed. So focusing on that for a little bit. The fourth element is really highlighting the results and successes you're achieving through this program. So focusing in on maybe one or two elements, as I mentioned earlier, and not everything in the kitchen sink, I think is really important to try to get across your message. So it's pretty basic, and I'm sure a lot of these elements you already incorporate into your success stories, but I think for us, these are kind of the key things that we really look for when we're reading success stories that are submitted by partners, and often are points where we'll go back to a partner and say, well, you didn't give quite enough detail on this. Could you maybe elaborate on section X? Or we didn't get enough information on what the community situation was like before the intervention from you with your program. Maybe you could share that kind of before and after detail on, for example, if you're talking about a farmer's income increasing, what was their original income so that we can compare that to what their income is now. Those kind of key elements that helps the general lay reader really understand better, and not just kind of presenting a result in a vacuum. So those are the key elements that I see. One thing we always get asked by our public affairs team for is quotes. So keep that in mind. Almost all success stories that are published on USAID's website do require a quote of some sort. It doesn't necessarily have to be a beneficiary. It could be, a member of the project team. It could be, a local agricultural minister for the specific province you're working in, that kind of thing, just to kind of put another human element into the story. So we always get asked about that and have not actually published stories when we can't get quotes. So it's always kind of good to have those up front in the story. Yeah, Kimberly.
For the quote, the question that we always go into, I'm sure you've had this before, but what's your guidance on like when you're translating from different language and quotes and how much you can kind of edit and tweak what the person's saying, keep it accurate, but
yeah, I think that's the exact point. So the question for those of you on the webinar, the question was what's the guidance related to translating a quote from another language. I think the last point, Kimberly, that you made is sticking to the general substance of the quote, but if you need to make a slight tweak here and there, I think that's fine. One other issue we've run into related to quotes is the name of the person being quoted. Our public affairs staff comes back to us all the time asking, does that person have a last name? Because we may have gotten a success story submitted with just the person's first name. Some countries, we know people only go by one name. So we make that clear when we edit the success story that, it is, this person who goes by one name, to make it clear, just based on kind of USAID's standard practices for quoting individuals. So they typically also like to have the person's age, if we have any family details on the individual being quoted, if it's a beneficiary specifically. I think probably less important if you're quoting the agriculture minister or someone along those lines. But we get those questions all the time back from our public affairs staff, so it's always great to have that information up front. Kate, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just in addition to this only going by one name or something, a lot of times we'll encounter, I work with Somalia, so especially in Somalia, they won't want to be identified because of security reasons, because being a beneficiary of the USA program puts them at risk. So if it's for security reasons, that's fine too, if they're not comfortable giving it, but just note that when you send it to us or note it in the story, and we'll make sure that that's noted.
Yeah. So for those of you on the webinar, my colleague Kate just commented about quotes from individuals who don't want their name affiliated with the quote because of security reasons. So for example, a beneficiary in Somalia not wanting their name associated with a quote so they don't get recognized as someone receiving assistance from the U.S. government, that's fine, and just make sure to note that in the success story when you're submitting it to us, if that is a concern. And we definitely know there are certain countries our partners work in where that is a real issue, and we want to make sure to protect those individuals. So we do recognize that may be an issue for some countries where we work.
There's a question online.
Yeah,
Sorry.
online question, great.
If they're sending in photos and quotes, do they need written permission from
I don't know what your all standard practice is. I mean, typically when I'm taking photos, so this is a question for those of you on the webinar, and this is the webinar question that just came through. Typically, if I'm going out and taking photos of beneficiaries, I ask for their permission to take their photos. And, you know, some people have told me no. So that's generally the standard practice I've been following, is if they've given me permission to take their photo, then we can use it. I don't know if you all have any other guidance related to that, Jessica or Meredith.
Most recently, when I was in the field, that was similar to what our development outreach and communications officer in the field indicated that she did, which was to get verbal permission for photos. I did not find that they had like a release form for quotes or anything like that. Although I guess it can't hurt to get it, but we typically don't follow up on that too closely.
Okay. So for those of you on the webinar, I did ask our Bureau of Food Security colleagues about the same question, and it's generally the same practice that I follow, is where asking the individual verbally for approval to take their photo. I have not seen any, as my colleague said, I have not seen any written form asking them to sign to be allowed to quote. But, you know, that's certainly something that I can look into to make sure that we're not missing that in USAID policy. But I'm pretty sure standard practice is to ask verbal permission of the individual. Are there other questions? Okay, so what we thought we'd do is, for the next short period of time, is split up into pairs, and the four of us, and well, including our BFS colleagues, so the six of us can also float around and assist where necessary. I think we had asked everyone to bring a success story. I don't know how many of you were able to bring one with you. If not, we have sample ones we can share with you. Did you all bring success stories? The two. All right. So we have a few ones that we've kind of taken out the markers of what country it is, et cetera, to use. So what we thought might be useful, rather than me talking at you some more, is you all actually looking at a colleague's success story and kind of using the guidelines that we've talked about in the past half an hour, and maybe making some suggestions for that colleague on how the story might be expanded upon, improved, where you might have questions. It's a kind of a, you know, peer-to-peer learning experience, so that I'm not talking at you the whole time. So if you all are willing and game to do this, the six of us from USAID can float around, or if you don't have a success story, we can share one that we brought with us that's from a couple of years ago that you all can certainly look at to read as well.
One more question.
We have another webinar question.
This might not need to be discussed in a whole group, but just in case, in terms of getting permission from beneficiaries to take photos or get quotes, how far should we tell them that their information might go? You know, do we tell them this might go all the way to Congress, this might go to FCC, like how far do you tell them?
I mean, I think standard practice, I guess you could say that we are using photos for sharing with the American public. I mean, if they're going on our USAID website, then, yeah. We actually visited with a beneficiary when I was in Burkina Faso earlier this year, who had been visited by our assistant administrator last year, and our assistant administrator has been using this woman as an example because she loved how successful this woman had been as a result of the programs. And we're not working with this woman anymore. We haven't been for 3 years, but she's still kind of going gangbusters on her farm. So we were telling her that the president now knows about her because our assistant administrator talked about her enough in speeches and testimony that her name's kind of floated up, and she was so excited. So it's you never know where a success story will take you, and who will get to hear it, whose ears get to hear it. So, BK?
The situation can vary from one place to another. A couple of months ago, I was in Liberia visiting one FDP when distribution was going on. And outside the distribution center, there are a lot of economic activities that take place because people come and sit there for hours. So one woman was roasting corn, and then I was taking that picture just to capture the moment that along with the distribution, these other things also happen. And then a different person standing on the side commented that that person is taking photograph and he is going to go and sell it for money.
Huh, interesting.
So I'm sure that if I would have taken picture of that woman, she would have objected to it, or she would have asked for money or something like that. So the reaction can be different from one place to another.
Yeah, good point. So for those of you on the webinar, we just had a shared experience from one of the attendees who recently traveled and had an experience with someone saying that the photo might be used by the person taking the photo to sell it. So use your best judgment about that. So generally my standard practice has been to ask first. Any other questions before we break up into smaller groups? Any webinar questions? So for those of you who have a success story with you, you want to find someone else who also has one. And for those of you who don't have one, come up to see me and Nina, and we'll hand you out one as a sample to take a look at. So.
You know what? I don't think
Thank you.
the one in
Oh,
perfect. So one thing that so it's not
We're excited to be regularly.
I brought
how about a problem?
Yeah, a lot of different.
And then actually I would say about how to breastfeed and stuff, then it would be, I would want, not just the stuff of feeding, but like a line that implies what you're about to say, which is breastfeeding.